Hi, everyone. This is Global Podcast, your window to the world. Breaking news, big ideas, your global hangout for what's happening now, and bold conversations. Wherever you are, we're bringing it to you. Let's get started.
All right, so let's dive into this. You look at the global landscape, right? And there's just this massive tension surrounding the Russia-Ukraine war. It's impossible to ignore. And you've got these two figures, Putin and Trump, taking pretty big actions, driving the narrative.
Yeah, you're spot on. We're seeing things escalate on multiple fronts, military, economic, all against this backdrop of a conflict that just drags on.
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We've been sifting through a ton of news analysis, geopolitical commentary, all the good stuff. And the big question we're tackling is this: what happens next? What are the ripple effects of Russia's latest military mobilization? And what about Trump pushing harder for a ceasefire? And then, of course, there's China lurking in the background. We want to break this all down, give you those key insights so you're not drowning in information, right?
That's it. It's about making sense of this tangled web of actions and how they all connect.
Okay, so first up, let's look at Russia's military moves. Putin signed this decree on March 31st, and it's not small potatoes.
Right. It's a conscription order calling up 160,000 Russian men, 18 to 30 years old, for mandatory military service. And this is huge, actually. We haven't seen a conscription effort on this scale in Russia for like 14 years, since 2011.
Well, yeah. And they're saying, Moscow that is, that these recruits won't be sent to Ukraine. But, and this seems important, we've seen in the past that, conscripts have ended up fighting near Ukraine's borders.
Yeah, you gotta look at the track record, right? The official line and past actions, they don't always match up. It raises the question, what's Putin really planning? Even if these guys aren't hitting the front lines right away, this is a massive boost to Russia's military strength. And it could mean they're ready to dig in for a long fight.
Which, it kind of ties into the whole ceasefire thing, right?
Yeah.
The world's pushing for peace, but Russia's getting ready for more war.
Exactly. The U.S.-led ceasefire proposals, Trump's included, Russia's already said, nope, not good enough. And this military buildup, it sends a pretty strong message. We're not backing down and we're ready to fight. They might even be trying to gain an upper hand in negotiations.
And they're not mincing words about their conditions for a ceasefire. Sanctions relief, UN oversight of Ukraine, that's some serious stuff. For folks who might not be up to speed, when we talk about sanctions relief, what are we really talking about?
Good question. When Russia says sanctions relief, they're talking about all those economic restrictions the West has hit them with, hitting their banks, their energy exports, cutting them off from global markets and tech. These sanctions are hurting them, no doubt. So getting rid of them, that's a big win they're aiming for. And UN oversight of Ukraine, that could mean peacekeepers, monitoring missions, stuff that could impact Ukraine's sovereignty.
Yeah, that's not messing around.
Yeah.
It really looks like Putin's digging in, rejecting Western pressure, thinking long term. This isn't a quick fix for him.
It seems that way. He's trying to establish realities on the ground, set the stage for any future agreement, instead of being pushed around by outside forces.
All right, so that's Putin's military play. Now, let's shift gears to Trump. He's taking a different approach. Less traditional diplomacy and more economic hardball.
Absolutely. Trump's talking about some serious tariffs on Russian oil imports, 25, even 50%. And here's the kicker. He's not just aiming at Russia. He's also targeting countries buying Russian oil, like India and China.
Wow, that's a broad stroke.
Yeah.
What kind of impact could those tariffs actually have?
Oh, it could be huge. Russia's economy is heavily reliant on energy exports. Tariffs that high, that could seriously damage their revenue stream. Plus, it puts pressure on their international relationships, especially with India and China, their biggest buyers. They'd have to rethink their ties with Russia.
And it's not just the policy, right? Trump's putting a personal spin on it, almost like he's laying down a challenge to Putin. Tapping us along, I will not be happy. What's he trying to say?
Oh, there's definitely a personal element. When he says tapping us along, it's like he's saying, look, I'm not buying any of your stalling tactics, and I will not be happy. That's a straight-up ultimatum. It's putting pressure on Putin, making him feel the heat. It's classic Trump.
And he hasn't held back on criticizing Putin directly, like questioning Zelensky's legitimacy. That really ticked him off.
Yeah, that's right. Trump was reportedly pretty furious about Putin questioning Zelensky's right to lead Ukraine. Shows you there's still a lot of friction there, a lot of disagreement. It's not just about finding a solution, it's about principles too.
But even with all this public pressure and criticism, it seems like they're still talking. At least that's what the Kremlin's saying.
Yeah, that's the strange part. The Kremlin's saying, we're still talking to the U.S., but they're also calling those talks complicated. So behind all the posturing and pressure, the diplomatic channels are open, even if it's messy.
Okay, so we've got Russia mobilizing, Trump throwing down economic threats. And now we get to China, and their role is, well, it's complicated. They're playing a very careful game here.
You could say that. Officially, China's saying they want to be constructive, help end the war. That's what their foreign minister, Wang Yi, said. Sounds peaceful, right? Like they're ready to mediate.
But there's a whole other side to the story. China's relationship with Russia has gotten a lot closer since the invasion.
Right.
What's the deal with that?
So while they're talking peace, they're also saying they support Russia's legitimate security interests. And look at their actions. Since 2022, their economic and political ties with Moscow have grown massively. They haven't condemned the invasion, not once. It's a mixed message, for sure. Their trade is booming, they're doing joint military exercises. It's a real strategic alignment.
So they're saying one thing but doing another. And a lot of analysts aren't buying the Peacemaker Act.
Right. Many experts argue that China's not a neutral mediator. They're actually enabling Russia's war effort. They're propping up Russia's economy with trade, and there's concern about technology transfers, stuff that Russia can use for military purposes. They're helping Russia get around those Western sanctions.
That's a big deal. If they're actively helping Russia wage war, it's hard to see them as being neutral, right?
Exactly. And most analysts believe China's not going to pressure Putin to back down. The bigger picture is that both countries see the U.S. as a rival. They want to limit U.S. influence, and that shared goal outweighs anything happening in Ukraine.
So what happens if Trump actually goes through with those oil tariffs, especially hitting China and India?
That's the big question mark. It could escalate things big time. China might just ignore those tariffs. And then what? Russia becomes even more dependent on Beijing. They might end up as the junior partner in that relationship, something Putin's always tried to avoid. He wants to be on equal footing with China.
So let's try to wrap our heads around all this. What's Russia's game plan here? What are they trying to achieve?
It seems like their strategy is twofold. Keep pushing on the ground in Ukraine, and don't give in to any U.S. demands for a ceasefire. They just captured Razlia village in Donetsk. That shows they're still on the offensive, and this massive conscription. That says they're ready for the long haul.
And can Trump's threats of these secondary sanctions actually change anything?
Right.
Can they really force India and China to back down?
Those sanctions could definitely disrupt things. Russia needs those energy partnerships. But the real question is, what will India and China do? If they comply, that's leverage for Trump. If they don't, well, then it's a whole different ballgame.
We've talked about China potentially digging their heels in. What about India? They buy a lot of Russian oil. How are they likely to react?
India's in a tough spot. They need that Russian oil, but they also have to think about their relationships with the West, their economic interests. It's possible they'll try to reduce their reliance on Russia, maybe find other sources of oil, to avoid getting hit by U.S. penalties. But whether that'll be enough to satisfy the U.S., that's another story.
So putting it all on the table, what are the chances of a ceasefire anytime soon? Doesn't sound too promising.
Honestly, the outlook for a ceasefire is pretty bleak right now. Russia's not budging on their stance, and China's offering more symbolic support than real action. They're talking peace, but their actions say something different. And honestly, those oil tariffs, they could actually make things worse, raise tensions instead of bringing everyone to the table.
It's a tangled mess, isn't it? You've got Russia's military moves, Trump's economic pressure, and China playing both sides.
You got it. And it all boils down to a fundamental question. Can economic pressure really win out over brute military force? That's the core issue. It's a question that will shape the future of this whole conflict.
Thanks for breaking all that down. It's a lot to process, and it's a story that's far from over. We'll be keeping a close eye on how this unfolds.
Absolutely. This is a situation that demands attention, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back soon to delve into another pressing global issue.
Always a pleasure. Until next time.